Hello everyone, welcome back to Techies on Wheel. Today we will discuss about what is RPA complexity, and once we have identified the feasibility of the process, how do we actually calculate what is the complexity of the process and how much time will it take for the entire development and completion of this project. So this tutorial is going to be a complete guide on RPA complexity analysis. Let's get started. First, let's understand what is the complexity analysis and what is this metrics we are talking about. So in the RPA assessment phase, once you identify the feasibility of the process, you know whether the process is feasible for automation or not. You get to analyze what is the complexity of this process. How much time will it take for the process to be developed and what kind of complexity it comes up with, how much challenges it has if I break it down. So you identify whether this process is technically feasible and how much complexity it brings up with the help of tool and the third-party integration. And similarly, what kind of resource you want to put in development to get this process developed. To know more about the feasibility analysis, you can refer the feasibility analysis and the other videos which are in the playlist. But in this video, we will target on the complexity metrics and complexity analysis. So, like I told, once your process is feasible, you need to let client know that how much time you are going to take to deliver this project. And this is where complexity metrics comes in picture. So complexity metrics is nothing, just a kind of an input which either the business or operations team fill it for you. These are certain set of questionnaires which are given back to the clients to fill details into it, basis which a number is given onto which your calculation fits and states that, okay, this is going to be 4 weeks of effort or 6 weeks or 8 weeks of effort. So these metrics is built up around 3 set of areas, where the first one is the information related to the process. The second one is around the technical feasibility of the process, and third one is the volumetric information about the process. We will discuss all of these in detail. Now let's talk about the rating. So here, like the feasibility analysis, here as well we have 3 ratings, which is low, medium, and high. If this is something opposite of the feasibility analysis, the higher the rating was, the better feasible the process was. But in the complexity, it is opposite of it. So if your complexity rating is low, which means it is more like it is not much complex process, and henceforth it is a very good candidate for automation, can be easily automated. If your rating is medium, it means automation is possible, but there are few challenges onto it. Maybe you need to use more actions, or it is more lengthier, or it is more complex in terms of business rules and logics. When the rating is high, which means that it is a super complex, it's a complex process, and it might need integration of third-party tools, maybe ICR, OCR. Generally, where they are involved, these are usually rated as the high-rated projects, complexity projects, I would say. And generally, it is not that it's not feasible for automation. Of course, it can be, but the entire development and effort would be much higher compared to the other rated process. So let's talk on to the what is complexity metrics and how does it look like. Okay, so this is our complexity calculator, to which we also call it as complexity metrics. This is entire metric parameters using which we determine what is the estimated development and the standardization effort of this process. So talking about the metrics, the certain metric factors which I have considered here, and this is again which I have taken from the reference of Automation Anywhere website. The one we are considering here is that the process name. This is not relevant considering the getting the estimate actually. So this I'm leaving as blank. The other one is the manual hour, how much hours monthly is spent on this process. How many people are involved in this process? That is the FTE count. The department, technology landscape, information silos, process steps, data size, business logic, deployment, and standardization. We will discuss these definitions in detail. So let me get you to there. The first one, which we were talking about, is the manual hour. This is nothing but just an estimation we need to take from the client that how many number of hours an employee spent on monthly basis on this particular specific process which we are targeting to calculate the complexity of. How can we calculate it? So there is an example. Say an employee spent 2 hours per day to do this process, and there is only one employee who's engaged for this process. So in that scenario, if you consider 2 hours of a day, and there is a 20 working day per month, so we calculate it according to that and we multiply it with 2 into 20, that is 40. So here the calculation set back to 40 manual hours monthly, and that is what it is filled here. So the drop down has 11 to 40, 0 to 10, and 41 plus. So we have selected 11 to 40 hours. Next one is personal quantity. It is again the count of the SME, the one which we discussed here. So we are saying that one employee was engaged. Similarly, you need to know how many people are actually working onto this particular process. So the number of FTE increases, the number of people performing this task increases. So is directly proportional number of hours of effort which is spent onto it. And similarly, you need to have multiple calculations around it. That is what this parameter is very important. The third one is the department. So why we are considering department? Say there is a process which requires 2-3 teams to work in silos or come together to complete an entire task one by one entirely. So there might be one, say, IT admin team who is taking details maybe, and then there would be a database team who is feeding this detail into a database, and then there are certain other department onto which who refer this database part for their analysis, and at the end a report is generated and which is sent to the management, say. So there are 4 departments and teams involved here. And when there are multiple departments generally involved, the more tedious, complex this process becomes, considering that multiple department takes their own time, and the availability of these resources at a time might not be that much feasible or possible. So this stretches the entire life cycle of this automation timeline. This is why we need to be very clear, and we need to set expectations accordingly with client that the hours or the smoother the delivery would be, as smooth the transition of the knowledge of the entire process be. So this is why it is important to know the department. Next one is technology landscape. So what is technology landscape? It is nothing, just like we are telling that we are calculating how many applications and technologies are being used in this process. So when I talk about applications, there can be, say, more than one web applications, the one from where we are extracting detail, and maybe other application where we are feeding the details. So there are 2 web applications. Similarly, there can be n number of, like, Excel is being used for maintaining data, or maybe, say, you are sending email at the end. So email is also one part of application you are involving. So you need to know how many different applications are being involved here, and that is we calculate here. So for an example, if, say, there is an Excel, one website, one cloud app, and one email feature involved. So altogether, there are 4 technologies, technologies which are involved in this technology landscape. Next one is information silos. Now, what is this information silos? We are now getting one step down to understand how many sub applications or sub parts are involved onto this. So if I talk about Excel, for example, there might be Excel involved, but then you need to get one step down and know, are there multiple sheets as well in this Excel which you need to work upon? If there is a single sheet, it is much better. If there are multiple sheets involved onto it, the complexity increases accordingly. Similarly, if we talk about the websites, then you need to know how many pages you need to interact with. Are there multiple pop-ups which are coming? Again, if you are talking about the PDFs, how many pages of PDF you need to work with. If you talk about, say, similarly, if you talk about email, if I say, so is there any dedicated inbox, or you need to visit multiple mailboxes to get details out of it, or it is just that you need to send an email, onto which of course that can be done through other ways as well. It might not require you much complexity on the email part. So these things you need to calculate, and how this calculation is being done, it is based on the calculation of the subparts of it. So for example, if Excel has four sheets and a PDF you need to interact with has 5 pages, website you are referring here has 3 pages and 1 pop-up you need to interact with, and then one email, dedicated email you need to refer and work with. So altogether, if you calculate 4 plus 5 plus 3 plus 1 plus 1, this comes as 14 silos. This is how the calculation you need to do. The next one is process step. So this is again a step more down onto the information silos. Now you have details onto how many pages you need to work on with, how many websites pop-ups, and how many different screens you need to generally interact with. You need to now work, you need to figure out on the field level now. So if there is 4 pages, each page, how many fields you need to interact with. So that is a step more deeper. You need to get detail onto that. A screen might be, there can be process, there only one screen is involved, but then there are 50 fields you need to feed information into. This is why you need to figure out how many fields are also involved. There might be scenarios that when there are more than 5 pages involved, but it's just a click of next. So this is why this information is also required to calculate altogether what is the complexity of the process. For an example, say pulling 10 fields from a website data and putting them over 100 Excel columns and entering data into 15 website fields remaining, and then renaming of 5 files and moving 3 files. So altogether, if you calculate all these entire steps, it comes as 1 to 3 process steps. So these are the minutest level, I would say, of detail we need to gather. The next one we need to discuss about is the data size. So now we have worked, we know here how many applications are involved, how many pages and how many fields we need to interact with. Now comes the data. So say there is an example that there is Excel you need to work with, and then for each row of data, you need to perform certain steps. So it becomes very important to know that how many rows can be there in Excel you need to work on. Why it is important again? That if there are n number of rows, you need to work one by one, you need to use loop. If there are 100 like n number of rows and just you need to copy data and paste it over there. So these details are very important. What kind of data size you need to work with. And similarly, you need to build logic onto. So this is why it is important. And the expectation to be set here is that the larger the data set you need to interact with, the more systems and configurations you need to do. So say one row of data processing takes you 2 to 3 minutes, for example, with all the business rules and application update. Now, if you have 100 rows, which is working, which you need to work upon. So if I take it as 2 minutes each row, 100 rows comes up to 200 minutes, which is your near about. If you break out, then you need to break it in hours. And similarly, if there are in lakhs, you need to calculate how many hours of bot processing would it require. And then you need to multiply with the number of bots you would require on per day basis. And that is where this calculations comes in picture and is important. Then the more the number of bot you need, the more configurations and system you would require. So this is where the complexity increases with the larger set of data. The other one which we talk about is the business logic. So business logic is also very important and most critical part apart from these. So if we have all this sorted, we need to understand whether the logic being used is altogether it's a rule-based process or not. Is how complex is the rules of it. Say there is a certain automation process that if you get the file in a folder, you need to move it to certain folder. Okay, and then there comes a business rule which says if you get a file in this folder and the name of the file is XYZ and the extension should be .txt and the data should be in this format. So you see the complexity of the rules of the validations is getting increased. So in that scenario, you need to, if it matches certain business rules, you need to move the file. So earlier in the first use case, you were just seeing that, okay, there is a file which has dropped in this folder. You need to just move it out. It's hardly 3 to 4 steps onto which you can achieve this particular process requirement. But if you go on to the deeper level, the more the rules increases, the more the number of steps increases. And this is where you need to understand how complicated the logics involved here are. The lower the business logics involved, the lower is the complexity of the process. So the more the if condition, nested if conditions increases, the higher the complexity gets increased. Also, you need to be very clear here while discussing with client that these rules should be completely rule-based. It should not have any manual intervention or logic involved or human decisioning involved, because again, that is only where the feasibility of this process comes up with. So this is why the business logic input is required. Next is the deployment. So deployment is also a very important part which we need to discuss in the complexity analysis phase itself. This is because the delivery of the product is not only development, it's also deployment to the UAT and the production environment. So you need to understand at the complexity calculation level itself that how complex it is to roll out the process to the other environment. It can be that what you are building is on your system, on local, but what kind of application, what kind of applications are involved, what are the access which needs to be required, how is the behavior of that application if an environment changes. So these things depends completely onto the deployment strategy and the deployment platform. So if your queue environment is different than the live environment, that needs to be very clearly called out. There are scenarios when the application, which is a test application, and then there is a production application, might have few differences. So you might need to redevelop certain part of it as per consideration of production environment. So you need to clearly make that very clear with the client that when you will have your development of certain part will be doubled, effort will be doubled for that part of automation, considering the screens are different for these two things. And the priority should be that the UAT or the test application should be exact replica of the production application. So these things you need to be clear about, and you need to know at the complexity calculation phase itself. So certain things we are considering here, that are you using a QA environment to develop the automation? So if yes, then it is set to high. If there are differences between the QA and live environment, like I told in the previous example as well, is the automation development on the same machine as deployment? If not, then set to high. So these parameters you need to also have a check on too. Now moving back to the process evaluation. So all these parameters we have discussed here. The last one is the standardization of the process. So this is also very important, that if a process which you are looking on to for development is, say, all set, it's what your bot can easily do. So if that is there, the standardization is not required. Okay, but if in case there are certain things which you figure out at the time of analysis, that okay, this step can be reduced, or you need to ask certain set of questions. You need to standardize the process, that can I skip this part? Maybe there is a text box where you just need to enter some code and it takes you to certain screen, but then there can be a navigation to it, that you need to click on this and then this button and this button, then this screen comes. So you need to, if there is a possibility, you need to figure out that the steps can be optimized. And if yes, you need to have a word with client for the standardization of the process, and at the time of scope definition, you need to revamp it and take approval from client. So standardization is the other complexity parameter here we are considering. So now again, if you see here, for every metric, we have a certain numbers here. And the one you see here, process 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 9, these are, say, 9 processes I'm referring, for example. So each column represent the complexity analysis of each process. Consider it as projects, maybe. So when let us focus only on one process as of now. So manual hours, when we talk about the previous example we have kept that, okay, 2 hours per day for 1 month, that is 20 days, it comes to 40. So I'll select it 11 to 40. Similarly, how many people are involved? So accordingly, you can pop the number here. Departments. So these are all the parameters which we have set as per our requirement. Technology landscape and all basis the calculation of the input set here. There is a development effort which comes into picture. So as per the details we feed here in each of the process columns, the estimated development efforts comes into picture. So basis the calculation metrics, if we see here 3 weeks of development effort, and then 4 weeks for the medium and 6 weeks for the high complexity process is which comes into here. And when you talk about the standardization effort, it is again that it will take 1 to 2 weeks. Why it is taking 1 to 2 weeks? The standardization complexity we have kept here is medium. If we revise it to low, you see the standardization effort range reduces to 1 to 2 days. So this is how you set up your complexity metrics. Similarly, if I talk about this deployment complexity, so the lower would be the complexity of these things, the lower will be the entire complexity. So these are directly proportional things. Let's talk about the backend calculation now. How is this parameter getting calculated, and how is this particular number coming in picture? So for every attribute, there is a number set. For the manual hours, so this is not going to affect me. That is why the percentage here is kept as 0. It is not being calculated, and there's no differentiator if we don't put details there. The other is the personal quantity. So this is again, the number of system might get increased as per the requirement. We have segregated it on the percentage of 5% on the overall personal quantity. The attribute we have kept here for the range of 1 to 2, 3 to 8, and 9 plus. Accordingly, the percentage is being calculated here. Similarly, we have a certain percentage which we have allocated for each of these departments and technology landscape information silos accordingly, and the overall of it comes to 100%, onto which this attribute comes into picture. So this is how the entire calculation works. If you want to revise or maybe add certain attributes onto it, you can do your calculations as per your organization's requirement and your team requirement, and accordingly this process evaluation sheet can be prepared or optimized. So this is how the entire complexity is calculated. Basis this number, this is what is communicated to the client, at how much effort it would take for the entire process to be developed, standardized, and moved to the production environment. This time frame again could vary as per your policies or your organization, but this is what we are just taking here for the reference purpose. So moving ahead, let's have a look on what next. So in the next video, we will discuss about the process design document in detail. What is it and how do we build it? Till then, stay happy, stay healthy, keep learning and keep growing. Thank you, everyone.